Hi again, Jack Van Breen from Guitar Showcase, coming to you live from the Steve Miller stage, we'll say. Steve has been gracious enough to ask us to find good homes for some of his guitars. We can talk about it in a whole nother show. But I like the vibe playing with his guitars gives me. Today we're going to talk about multi-effects pedals. There's another segment where we talk about individual stomp boxes. And we talked about how for $300-400 you can get yourself a good distortion unit, a good time modulation, either phaser, flanger, or chorus, and a good delay. And you know, $300-400 for 3 pedals, that's not too bad. But the most expensive part about any effects box is the box. The chips are relatively inexpensive, the circuitry is not too bad, but the physical metal box that you stomp on costs a fair bit of the cost of developing the box. Box too many times. If you have 3 of those in one box, you amortize the cost of those 3 boxes over one. So you are able to get 3 effects pedals for the price of about 1.5. And here's the interesting thing, if you make it a little bit bigger, you find out that you can get a multitude of pedals in one box because they use primarily integrated circuits to do all the processing, and it's just a simple matter to program 6 distortions as it is to put 1. So you'll find multi-effects boxes from companies like Digitech, Boss, Line6, to name a few, where you'll have a multitude of distortions available, a multitude of echoes, a multitude of time modulation like chorus, flanger, rotary speaker, etc., all in one simple container, semi-easy to use. Some of them, like Line6, use a menu-driven system, which can be fairly daunting to start with until you look at each menu as just one aspect of the device. Others, like Boss, use a stomp box model for their layout where you have one segment of the board is your distortions and dynamic processing. One segment of the board is your flangers and choruses. And one segment of the board is your delays. And they have knobs for each of those sections. So you just look at it as, I've got 3 pedals in one box. Makes it fairly simple. The Digitech model for their lower end stuff is you again drive through very simple menus. But the advantage there is you can get a Digitech processor for way under $100 that'll give you all those sounds if you don't mind putting a little bit of effort into digging them out. So you have a lot of options. I'd like to talk today mostly about the Line6 product, partially because that's been my primary sound generating source for over 15 years. I'm real comfortable with it and I get complimented all the time, so I figure I must be doing something right. Line6 started out as a company that did amplifier modeling. People would go and they'd see a show and they'd go, wow, I really like that guy's guitar tone. He makes that Fender Bassman sound really cool. And then the next band would come up and the guy had a 50-watt Marshall. And the next band, the guy was playing a kind of a cool jazzy thing through a twin. And you go, I want all those amplifiers. How do I carry 400 pounds of amplifiers to the show in my Volkswagen? It just doesn't work. So Line6 and some other folks came up with the idea of modeling those tonalities. And the first modeling amplifiers were pretty crude, but they kind of gave you that effect of when you change from a twin sound to a Marshall sound, you go, yeah, those do sound different. They took that technology and distilled it into a kidney bean called the Pod. And that was better technology for modeling. You had a lot of different amplifier sounds, and they started adding multiple effects to it. I have here at my feet, I'm not sure if it's in the frame or not, but we can pan down, the latest generation, the Pod HD 500. And this is the first pod that's come out in a long time where they've actually upgraded everything. The processing is much stronger. They went back and redid all the models that they've released with a much finer granularity of tonality. So it's much more realistic. Very dynamic. Very rich and warm. So I'm extremely pleased with it. and they didn't pay me to say that. That is my Fender basement tone. Basically a 1958 Fender Tweed Basement 410. And as I hit it harder, it distorts. When I back off, very clean. Basically, I use 4 different amplifier styles in my show. I use the Fender, primarily. I have on my next selection a Vox. A little bit shiny, a little bit honky. Then the JCM 800. Known for that squealy, glassy tone. And then the last tone I use is if I'm making serious money, it's my jazz tone from a Fender 65 Twin. Whoops. With Leslie. Again, very warm, very rich, dynamic. So those are the 4 basic amplifiers, but along with modeling amplifiers, we model tone. Tone modifiers, stomp boxes. Here's the Tube Screamer. Which again, being dynamic, clean up with just turning down the volume, picking lighter. So distortion, time modulation, this is a chorus. Modeled off the Boss CE1 of one of the first analog choruses to come out, and still my favorite, because it doesn't depend on a stereo image to really sound rich. And of course my delay. Multi-effects boxes, and a lot of the stomp boxes have a tap thing where I can tap the tempo. What that's useful if your drummer speeds up. You can keep the echo in time with the drummer. I'm going to get in trouble for that Tuesday night. My last stomp box that I cue my chain, and we talked about this in another thing, is my compressor. Which brings those choir sounds out, allows me to really get a singing, fat, sustaining tone. Couple that with the overdrive. So allows me a lot of versatility, and I haven't really driven through a lot of different menu choices. And the earlier multi-effects pedals, you'd have to have a setting for reverb, a setting for reverb chorus, a setting for reverb chorus delay, a setting for reverb chorus delay distortion, a setting for chorus delay reverb, and it goes on, and you're stomping. Was it 98 or 23 for this song? Here I have an amplifier, and I can add or subtract whatever tones I need to. That makes it very simple. But there's a couple other tones that I like. The ubiquitous vibrato, thank you, Leo. Everybody calls it vibrato. It's technically tremolo, and it's used in an awful lot of songs. That's probably the most common, recognizable thing. So we have tremolo. We have the rotary speaker. one of my favorite tones. The last tone that and this is a patch I just put together just yesterday. That's very useful because I don't feel like singing with a tube in my mouth, but that's kind of a simulated talk box. Standalone, kind of like a simulated acoustic guitar, not so nice, but dropped into the mix, it really adds a nice tonal flavor to it. So, that's basically most of the features that you can get out of a multi-effects. Like I say, I prefer the Line 6, I kind of grew up with it. Boss makes a very nice multi-effects, as does Digitech. And there are others out there I'm not as familiar with.